Stamina bars are everywhere now. Running, climbing, swinging swords, dodging attacks, modern games love reminding players that their character is, in fact, a human being and not an unstoppable machine. And honestly, it makes sense. As games become bigger and more immersive, developers want players to feel that physical effort. The exhaustion. The tension. The struggle to survive. But let's be real, stamina systems don't always make games better. Sometimes they just slow things down. Sometimes they feel restrictive. And sometimes they exist purely to annoy players. But when they're done well, they can completely transform a game. Especially in survival, horror, adventure, and simulation titles, stamina and fatigue add an extra layer of pressure that players constantly have to think about. Every sprint matters. Every mistake has consequences. Suddenly, managing exhaustion becomes just as important as fighting enemies. And the best games don't just use stamina as a limitation. They turn it into part of the experience. A mechanic that creates tension, rewards smart decision-making, and makes survival feel genuinely earned. So with that in mind, here are some games that actually got stamina systems right. Number 6. Avowed. A rare clever use of stamina in a high fantasy RPG. You probably wouldn't expect a deep, realistic stamina system in a colorful high fantasy RPG filled with magic, gods, and giant monsters. But Avowed actually makes it work. Sure, players take control of a godlike hero, but that doesn't mean they're invincible. In the middle of combat, stamina becomes a constant factor. Swing too aggressively, block too much, or burn through spells too quickly, and your character starts gasping for air right in the middle of the fight. And that vulnerability matters. The weight of your weapon, your playstyle, even the type of gear you're using, all of it affects how quickly you burn through stamina and recover from exhaustion. What's especially interesting is that spellcasting drains stamina too, meaning players have to balance more than just health and essence. Every attack, dodge, and spell becomes part of a larger resource management dance. And the system doesn't stop with the player. Enemies have their own version of fatigue through the stun meter, which fills up as you pressure and disrupt them in combat. Time things correctly, and you can stagger enemies, interrupt attacks, and completely shift the momentum of a fight. The result is combat that feels surprisingly weighty and physical for a fantasy RPG. Every clash has impact. Every mistake has consequences. And paired with the immersive first-person perspective, it gives Avowed a grounded, visceral feel that helps its battles stand out from a lot of other modern fantasy games. Number 5. Death Stranding 2, On the Beach. Subtle, nuanced, and effective in the game's context. Death Stranding 2, On the Beach takes the already unique survival systems of the first game and pushes them even further. Kojima Productions didn't just make the sequel bigger or more cinematic, they made it more physical. Every journey feels demanding. As players guide Sam Porter bridges across the brutal landscapes of post-apocalyptic Australia and beyond, stamina becomes one of the most important systems in the entire game. And it's layered in a way that constantly keeps players engaged. The weight of your cargo matters. The terrain matters. The weather matters. A long trek through rough terrain can wear Sam down fast, especially when balancing heavy equipment while storms, hazards, and the environment itself fight against you every step of the way. What makes the system work so well is how naturally it ties into the core experience. This is a game about survival. About endurance. About carrying both physical and emotional weight across a hostile world. So fatigue isn't just a gameplay mechanic, it's part of the atmosphere. And despite how detailed these systems are, the game rarely feels tedious or overwhelming. Managing stamina, endurance, and wear and tear becomes second nature over time, adding tension and immersion without constantly interrupting the flow. The result is a survival experience that feels raw, grounded, and surprisingly immersive. Which is exactly what a Death Stranding sequel needed to be. Number 4. Nioh 2. Players and enemies alike are given a similar, deep stamina mechanic. Much like the brutal samurai adventure that came before it, Nioh 2 doubles down on fast, punishing combat and layers it with even more depth. This is a game packed with deadly weapons, supernatural abilities, and progression systems that constantly reward mastery. Whether players prefer the reach of an Odachi, the speed of dual blades, or the chaos of a Kusarigama, every fight demands precision and patience. But what really makes Nioh 2 stand out is how deeply stamina is woven into everything. Managing your own ki, the game's version of stamina, is already a huge part of combat. Attack too aggressively or dodge carelessly, and you'll leave yourself completely exposed. But the real brilliance is that enemies play by similar rules. Every foe has their own ki meter, and understanding how to drain it becomes just as important as dealing raw damage. Different enemies recover at different speeds, react differently under pressure, and become vulnerable in unique ways depending on their behavior and design. That one mechanic adds an incredible layer of strategy to every encounter. Suddenly, combat isn't just about hitting harder, it's about controlling momentum. Breaking an enemy's ki at the right moment can completely swing a fight in your favor, opening the door for devastating counters and finishers. Combined with Soul Core abilities, yokai powers, and the game's insanely detailed combat system, Nioh 2 creates battles that feel tense, technical, and endlessly rewarding. It's the kind of stamina system that doesn't just limit the player. It defines the rhythm of the entire game.
Make sure if you're enjoying our list to hit that like button and of course subscribe for future content.
Number 3. Valheim. Fatigue attached to consumables and Viking actions. Even in early access, Valheim has already earned a massive following, and it's easy to see why. Iron Gate Studio created a survival game that blends Viking mythology, procedural exploration, and co-op chaos into something that feels both relaxing and brutally unforgiving. One moment you're peacefully building a longhouse in the woods, and the next you're desperately fighting for your life against a towering monster in the middle of a storm. A huge part of what makes that tension work is the game's stamina system. In Valheim, stamina affects almost everything. Combat, running, swimming, chopping trees, climbing terrain, even simply being wet can make survival harder. And because the game leans heavily into stamina-based combat, every decision carries weight. Heavy armor might protect you, but it also drains your stamina faster. Swing too wildly in battle, and you'll leave yourself defenseless. Try swimming across deep water while exhausted, and you might not make it back at all. It creates this constant balancing act between aggression, preparation, and survival. And in true Viking fashion, food becomes just as important as weapons. Hunting, cooking, and managing supplies aren't optional side mechanics, they're essential for restoring stamina and staying alive between battles. The result is a survival system that feels surprisingly immersive without becoming overly complicated. It's simple on the surface. But underneath, Valheim constantly forces players to respect the world around them. Number 2. Dark Souls 3. A soul-crushing burden attached to most player actions. Few games make stamina feel as important, or as terrifying, as Dark Souls 3. From the moment players step into this brutal dark fantasy world, every action feels heavy. Every sword swing, dodge roll, blocked attack, and desperate sprint carries weight, almost like you can physically feel the burden of the Ashen One's armor dragging against the ground. And at the center of it all is that iconic green stamina bar. On the surface, it seems simple. But in practice, stamina controls everything. Attack too much, and you can't dodge. Dodge too often, and you can't block. Run recklessly into a fight, and suddenly you're standing there exhausted while some nightmare creature wins up for a killing blow. Almost every action outside of basic movement chips away at stamina in some way, turning combat into a constant balancing act between aggression, defense, and survival. And that pressure is exactly what makes Dark Souls 3 so intense. Because stamina isn't just a mechanic, it's the heartbeat of the game. It's what creates those panic-filled moments where players desperately scramble toward the next bonfire with barely any health left, or try to survive one last encounter against some horrifying serpent-like monstrosity blocking the path forward. Combined with the ever-present risk of losing your souls, the stamina system gives every fight a level of tension that few games can match. It's punishing, methodical, unforgiving. And when everything finally clicks together, few combat systems feel more satisfying. 1. The Long Dark. Players must juggle and balance various conditions tied to stamina. Horror games thrive on vulnerability. And few games make players feel more vulnerable than The Long Dark. Stranded in the frozen Canadian wilderness as crash-landed pilot Will Mackenzie, players aren't fighting armies or monsters most of the time, they're fighting nature itself. The cold. The hunger. The isolation. And hanging over all of it is fatigue. Whether you're playing the story campaign or the game's harsher survival mode, stamina becomes one of the most important systems in the entire experience. Every action drains energy, and once exhaustion starts setting in, even basic survival becomes dangerous. Climbing a rope. Hauling supplies through deep snow. Traveling too far without rest. It all takes a physical toll. What makes the Long Dark so effective is how interconnected these survival systems feel. Hunger, sickness, injury, freezing temperatures, they all work together, constantly wearing the player down and forcing tough decisions. Do you risk pushing forward while exhausted? Or stop to rest and potentially freeze during the night? That constant tension gives the game an almost oppressive atmosphere, especially in survival mode where every mistake can spiral into disaster. And because the stamina system is grounded in believable physical limitations, the world feels incredibly real. Not cinematic. Not exaggerated. Just cold, brutal, and unforgiving. Which is exactly why The Long Dark remains one of the most immersive survival experiences ever made.
Okay, so that's it for today. So if you enjoyed it, punch the like button, comment down below, of course, subscribe to the channel for my Twitter and Instagram links down below. As always, of course, I'll put my two buddies first in the description for YouTube needs, tag titles, thumbnails, all that good stuff. So that's something you need help with, especially like I did. First in the description, download it today. Trust me, you'll wonder how you ever got on with it. And of course, our partner channels, and they hit down below, hit that join button to put myself and the channel, and of course get a huge range of benefits. But greatly appreciated. But of course, you never have to. But if you don't, you have to subscribe and watch the next video, or something might follow you home. You never know, stuff happens. Okay, thank you very much. I'll see you all again very soon.